Welcome to the first International College of Phlebology Veins meeting. I set this up because after a bit of a story, which many of you will know, and those of you who don't know, we'll go through. It all started 18 years ago, last Sunday. We had our 18-year anniversary from doing the first endovenous operation. And it was Judy Holdstock, Judy's down here in the front row, and myself, who started the whole ball rolling in the UK with the first venous closure. And in those days, I'd spent about 10 years before that trying to get away from stripping in the groin, cutting in the groin, stripping, because it became very clear to me that all the work from RM Glass from Ireland, who I've never met, but is somebody who changed my life. When I was watching people doing stripping, I couldn't believe that patients would accept that varicose veins always come back, and they'd go to their GPs who would say, yes, varicose veins always come back, and they'd go to their surgeons and say, yes, varicose veins will always come back, and nobody was doing anything at all to try and stop varicose veins coming back. And I can't imagine any other area of medicine, not even Botox, which people look down on, where if you get a bad result, doctors just accept it. But for about 100 years, people have just accepted bad results as if varicose veins should have bad results. And that really annoyed me. So I'd spent 10 years before that looking at all different things, such as putting clips on the veins. And RM Glass was I read his work, and he was showing very simple things, that if you tied veins with nylon, you got less recurrence than if you tied it with catgut. And it became very clear that neovascularization regrowth was very important. And I couldn't also understand why we were cutting in the groin when we knew we got infections from the groin, when you could easily, with ultrasound, go up. And I went to a conference, I went to a course by Philip Coldridge-Smith that changed my life, because he suddenly introduced duplex ultrasound. And for the first time back in 1985, as a registrar, I found that you could actually see what was happening in the veins. You didn't have to guess anymore. We didn't have to do Trendelenburg. We didn't have to just tap the veins and guess where we were. We could actually see what was going on. And that revolutionized my thinking. So we tried all sorts of endovenous work. We were putting little hooks up inside. And unfortunately, I didn't think of using heat, because if I had, I would be a millionaire and I wouldn't have to still work. And it was the Venus company that decided that heat was the way to close the veins. So we had done all this work in the 1980s and early 90s about putting things inside the veins, but we didn't know what to do when we were there. And we also knew that if you cut the veins grew back. I don't know if anybody here still doesn't believe in neovascularization. When we used to talk about it 15 years ago, we'd be shouted down. People said, neovascularization, it doesn't happen, it's all hemodynamics. But it's not, it's neovascularization. And we can see that now because we don't get the same recurrences after endovenous thermoablation. So having started the ball rolling with a venous closure catheter, which was very nice, and we'll be talking about it a bit later, but of course it's very slow, no one in the UK really paid any attention. In fact, we were laughed at when we said we were burning veins, and people said in 1999 and 2000 that it was ridiculous and it was just a fad and it wouldn't work. And in particular, one of our professorial colleagues who was very famous in London said it's completely dangerous to go from the bottom up and go to an open junction and to try and burn a vein if you couldn't do a flush ligation, because if you don't do a flush ligation, you're not doing a proper job. Now, all of us know that's not true now. But going against surgical dogma is, as we all know, a very dangerous thing to do, especially if you're a young consultant. And it wasn't until I got into the Telegraph in November 2000 when all of a sudden the world exploded, because everybody suddenly wanted to do it. And if you see in the internet in 2001, lots of people saying, we did the first this, we did the first that, because 2001 was when suddenly everyone realized there was something to this endovenous technique. And we started doing radio interviews, TV interviews, and all the usual things one does. The next thing that came along, which is just as important to me, because everybody talks about endovenous techniques as if that's the end of Venus. But in fact, Venus is exploding at the moment as an understanding. And this lady is the mother of a general practitioner. And what she showed me is that she had seen a very famous London surgeon who you all know, and I won't dare mention, who did a high tie and strip. And he took the bandage off, and all the varicose veins were still there, coming from inside the vulval area here, all the way down the inside and to the leg. And he was very embarrassed about it, so he did a free second one and took her back again, reopened her groin, stripped it again. She came and saw me a year later and said, why have I had 2 operations by a very famous man and my varicose veins have never gone? And admittedly, they're not particularly big varicose veins, but she'd paid thousands of pounds to have them removed, and they hadn't gone. And this was the first person that made me realize that not all varicose veins are in your legs. They may end up in your legs, but they're not necessarily in your legs. And again, Judy Holdstock, and why she's so important to the whole of this development, was she was the person that when I took her to it, she went, oh yes, I think we can have a look at these. And so she did a scan of the pelvis, and then she did the revolutionary thing. She did a transvaginal duplex scan, saw the ovarian veins, saw the internal iliac veins, and we suddenly realized that pelvic venous reflux causes leg varicose veins. And in fact, this had been written up in the 1960s, in 1966, largely ignored. It didn't really become famous again until 2005, which was 5 years after we started doing these cases, when Hobbs actually wrote up a case of varicose veins from ovarian from ovarian veins, and said that an ovarian varicocele can cause varicose veins. In fact, Lumley's group had already written in 1999 that you can get recurrent varicose veins from pelvic veins, so it's a bit topsy-turvy that you can get recurrences was discovered before primary varicose veins. But one way or the other, what happened, that opened up the second thing that this conference is about. It's not all about endovenous surgery, it's all about pelvic venous incompetence as well, and the difference between pelvic venous incompetence and reflux. And we'll be talking quite a bit about that because there's still quite a lot of concern in the world about veins. It seems to be that everyone's happy to treat veins when they're in the legs because it's just the legs. But as soon as they go into the pelvis, they're suddenly different. They're not veins anymore. They're suddenly magical, and it's really quite concerning. One of the problems, especially in America, is, of course, is radiologists who treat them inside, and everyone's scared of losing practice, so they don't want to find them if they don't do the cases. And for me, that's an anathema. I think that if you have a patient with a problem, you work together in teams, and I always try to pull people together in teams. Unfortunately, not everybody wants to work in teams, and people pull apart, but if you're going to give the best for patients, no one person can do everything in veins. You can't scan, you can't treat all the different veins, the internal ones in the pelvis, you can't treat the ones in the legs, and talk to the patients and do the research. It's impossible. So if you're not working in teams, I think one of the approaches in phlebology is now it has become a team approach. So in any case, we tried, when we found this, we tried to clip these veins with laparoscopy. It didn't work. We sent the patient to a laparoscopic surgeon up in Leeds who looked at it and said, no, too complicated. We were looking at all different ways, and eventually we started doing some transfemoral embolization. And in those days, the catheters wouldn't go around the corners, and one of our colleagues decided to go transjugular, and that changed everything, because all of a sudden we started getting near 100% success rates. Then in 2001, Judy Holdstock and I were getting rather fed up with the fact that we were treating all these great saphenous veins minimally invasively, and then I was doing SEPS, and I was doing a 2-centimeter incision down the leg under general anesthetic and clipping all these veins. And so all the advantage we had from the venous closure was being lost by doing SEPS. And Judy and I had one patient in particular, and Judy suddenly said, look, we can get into these veins so easily in the legs. Why don't we just try and see if we can do it into perforating veins? Because we've always believed perforating veins are important. So Judy and I just, and I have to confess now, it's over 15 years later, almost 18 years, we didn't have ethics or approval or anything, we just did it. And what we did, and this is a beautiful, beautiful diagram by Mr. Price. Those of you who don't know Mr. Price, please do meet him. He's down here in the front row. He goes, if you ever need any medical illustrations that you will never see in real life, but he can pull 3Ds into 2Ds and make them look beautiful. And this has been shown all around the world now, and this shows exactly what the Trollope technique is, which is the ultrasound, showing the perforator, going in at the fascial level, and then closing it with any heat process. The Americans very kindly reinvented this and called it PAPS in 2007, but it was described in 2001 as Trollope's and written up then. Venus did produce these two devices with us, the radiofrequency stillettes in 2004, but in fact you don't need them. You can use all sorts of techniques, and I think tomorrow or Friday we're doing some live cases showing how you can do this. And it's not just for perforators. Mr. Price has also written up a case series recently called the hedgehog technique, where if you have complex recurrences in the groin, you use multiple times of this. And don't think of these as perforators. Think of them as neovascular tissue. You can go in, you can close each one of those off with either radiofrequency or laser, and then foam over the top and get excellent results. So the Trollope technique has sort of given birth to all sorts of little areas where you can take off tiny points of veins if you need them just to close things. And as I say, we've been doing this now for about 18 years. So we started doing the conferences, and I set up conferences in 2005, 2006, 2007, just for the UK. And I got seduced to going and running some other conferences as a director, which I've recently resigned from because they weren't going the way I wanted to, and we set up this conference instead. We've always been doing teaching. This is a lovely animation of Mr. Price showing how to shove something in somewhere. As you can see, he's a very delicate surgeon from a military background. And I'm actually doing the delicate stuff on the camera. And so ever since we did our very first case in 1999, that summer, we've been teaching, and we've always run courses, sometimes by ourselves, sometimes companies ask us to. And since 2008, I've been a consultant for Angiodynamics and doing training for them. And a lot of the early days were people, they were asking me to go and see people and say, this person's using the techniques, they're not getting good results. And I almost never visited them because one phone call, you find simple things like they're not putting the patient head down, they're not exsanguating limb, just tiny little things like that. So what I thought was, really we need a place where you can have email support or just colleagues so that you can actually sit around and talk to people. In the Wendy Clinic, my passion is research. I get teased a lot being private practice. Everyone thinks I have Ferraris and everything. I don't. I have a very small house because all my money goes back into research because I find that the most interesting thing, not only to find out where we're going to, but also for the new generation. If you don't get the new doctors interested in research, we will end up with just functional doctors in the future. And when I'm older, and I need surgery, I want doctors who are interested in me, not just turning up and doing a job. So I set up the College of Phlebology in 2011, really totally different from almost all the other colleges that are around, because I'm trying desperately hard not to regulate. I'm not trying to provide guidelines, and I'm not trying to exclude people and say, you can't do it because you... Oh, someone not like what I was saying. So I'll just keep talking, it might come back. So I don't want to be exclusive when we have the College of Phlebology, and I don't want to say to people you can't operate because you don't have this qualification or that qualification. And a lot of the European and international colleges are trying to do that. What I want to be is a proper college where we're supportive of each other, where we teach people, encourage and advise, and we do research projects together so people can actually get together and become good at what they do, rather than always saying you can't do it because you're not a member of our college. We set up a website. Is this coming back on at all? Yes, that's good. Can you hear me all right? Yes? I'll just talk louder. Just if you can't hear me, just do this. Oh, that's better. I was going to say, if it's too loud, just do that. I'll work out whether your palms are up or down. So we set up a website. We provide information to the public, because one of the other things that I'm very keen on is I'm very keen that everybody in the community should do well. We're all vein experts, and if you do the job properly, you should be getting work. If you're not doing the job properly, I've got no interest in you. But if you're doing the job properly, we should be educating patients who need the service that they need to see vein experts. Because there's a huge amount of venous disease out there that is actually currently not being treated optimally. And some of it's not being treated at all. So we provided information to the public. We also made a members-only discussion area behind a password so people could ask confidential questions. Unfortunately, nobody would pay for membership at that time, and we didn't have any funds to grow. So we had to shelve that at the moment. It's still there, but we don't use it so much. I did produce a book in 2011, which is not a tome that I would ever, if you know lots about vein surgery, don't ever read it. This is really for public or people getting into veins. It's very simplistic, and it was based on a book that I had as a medical student for the ECG, where there's a thing called John Hampton called the ECG Made Easy. And when I was a medical student, there were these huge books on ECGs, and nobody ever read them, and everyone was scared of them. And this tiny book came out and said, the ECG is easy. You open page 1, it said, don't worry, the ECG is easy. The heart's a lump of muscle. There's a bit more on this side than that side, and that's why the ECG goes up this way. Chapter 2, the ECG is easy. Because of that lump of muscle, when it contracts, the line goes this way. And after about 11 chapters, you knew the ECG. It was absolutely fantastic. And I thought, a true expert can write a book that's simple. We all spend our time trying to make our science seem so complex, and it is complex, but if you can't simplify it to get people interested, then you're not an expert. So I wrote this. This was my challenge to see, could I make venous reflux easy? Now, if you read it, there'll be lots of people who criticize it, and there's lots of research show it's not right in 10% or 5% of people, but as a starter and getting interested, it's certainly up there. And it's certainly sold 6,000 copies at the moment, which I'm quite pleased with. We have got some new books coming out, which will be I can't call them veins made easy, but it's that sort of idea. We've got a LinkedIn group, and because we couldn't get a confidential discussion going, I ended up using LinkedIn. We've got 1,600 odd members at the moment. Lots of people ask questions, but it's open to anybody to see, so we have to be careful. So there's even more questions asked by individual emails behind. But I'm hoping someday we'll be able to get a confidential password-controlled advice centre again, and hopefully through the website. We've also opened up the Venus Times in conjunction with Dendrite, and so it's a free online newspaper, and it's got everything about veins, all sorts of things. And also, another thing I set up is the Leg Ulcer Charity to try and actually encourage patients to look for cures if they're curable. And it's one of those things in leg ulcers. What we know, about 50 or 60% of people could be cured, and about 40 to 50% of people can't be cured and need long-term care. And it's that teasing out of who needs which way. So I set up a charity, and that's what we want to do, is we want to try and integrate, and we're very, very lucky to have Ellie here, and we're trying to integrate the people who treat the end results of varicose veins not being treated properly, which is leg ulcers and skin damage, with those people treating cosmetic varicose veins, because they shouldn't be seen as two ends, they should be seen rather as two ends of the spectrum and not as two separate conditions. So if you want to keep up with the times, this is, as I say, just log on every so now and again, and there's a lot of interest and conference reports on this. Our life changed because at the moment I was limping along with the College of Phlebology, and what really changed it was we managed to get a big grant for Innovate UK, where we went into this grant with the University of Surrey and with the Whiteley Clinic, and we got funding for 3 years. And this is the person who changed everything for us. This is Dr. Jaya Nimchand. Those of you who are presenting will know Jaya very well, because she'll be writing to you and say, can you please get your presentations in? And some of us didn't, so she's chasing us. But Jaya is absolutely marvelous. She's 5 years postdoc, PhD, and she's running our research and development, but also our teaching. She's not only developing a lot of the research that you'll see us doing, but she's also is really running this meeting. It was her inception, and lots of other things she's been doing. So she's really changed the whole of the way we can push the College of Phlebology forwards. She runs a research team, and this is only some of the ones that you'll see here. There's Lena, who's over here, who's our research assistant. Harry, my PhD student at the moment, who you'll hear about. Emma and my daughter Alice as well, who've done research with us. And if you see on the website, we've had about 30 other researchers as well through the times as well. And these are the people, I can't thank everybody, that will come probably at the end of the conference, but these are the main people who have spent the last year doing nothing but getting this conference ready. Nicola Cahill, who will not have her photograph taken, but you'll see her outside. So she wouldn't let me put a photograph of her. Jake, Matt and Charlie. Now Matt and Charlie have done marvelously on the technology today, and if in the next 3 days everything goes seamlessly, they're your heroes. If halfway through the cases it all goes wrong, they're the villains. We shall see. What Matt's done very well is, if there is a technical problem, we've actually got backup videos of every sort of case. So in fact, we're actually fireproof to get the education across. So why have we set up the conference? The trouble with conferences is if you just stand up and talk, you can be didactic, you can have research. We're trying to mix everything together because I'm very keen that you should learn. You shouldn't come to a conference just for drinking. I mean, that's obviously the most important thing. But there's also learning. We need to go away educated. We also need to watch. My feeling is there's a lot of research showing that if you watch someone do something, you learn 1,000 times quicker than if you read about it. So the actual watching the techniques done is almost like doing, because of the mirror neurons in your motor cortex, you actually feel you've done it yourself. So you watch someone do something, you've done your first case already. You hear about it, you still haven't done it because you haven't understood it. Understanding, the most important thing is we're trying to put science into every single thing we do. We're not like companies and say, turn it to this jaws, pull it back at this point, and it's closed. We're trying to put science into the size of the vein, how much are you cooking, what's the power, those sorts of things at a cellular level. And ask. I want active discussions. If you have got any questions, as they say, there's no such thing as a ridiculous or silly question. If you don't know, ask. And if you don't want to ask in front of people, grab everybody behind the scenes and just ask them. So the aims of the conference, we're doing, in this auditorium, we're going to be doing live cases. We're going to talk about the background of diseases, see live cases, discuss the science, and then have questions and answers. Upstairs in a smaller room, because I assume few of you will be interested, we're actually doing the theoretical things, the laboratory studies, why we use certain power levels, why we use one laser, not another laser, why we use Clarivane or don't use Clarivane, what happens to the cell wall with immunocytochemistry and histology, so we can actually prove the techniques. It's not just saying after 1 year how many were closed, that's rubbish. because you don't know what's published and what wasn't and what was excluded. What you want to know is, did it work at the cellular level and the protein level? Because then you know what's going to happen. And all our research and all the research we accept here has a direct effect on your patients. In other words, you can take the science home and use it there and then to get better results. It's not esoteric. The third part is the leg ulcer stream, and we're incredibly lucky to have Ellie Lindsay, who got an OBE recently for her Leg Club Foundation, and she has been absolutely marvellous, and all my team have said how brilliant she's been, not only because she's come along to support us, but also because she's virtually taken over the agenda and taught us how to run it properly, and she's marvellous. If you haven't met Ellie before, you will do soon. She's been fantastic. And Susan Ostler, who's our lead nurse and taken leg ulcers to heart as well, and she works with us on both sides, on the venous side as well as the leg ulcer side, and really has a very good understanding now of the whole of the surgical aspect. So I think her and Eddie should really get on very well, because they're seeing things, the same problem from both ends. I'm being told I'm wittering on too much. Thanks, Alina. You're sacked. So that's also being run in the leg ulcer in conjunction with the Leg Ulcer Charity. Finally, there are some launches we're doing. So at this conference, we're launching the Venous Registry. Now, I know there are several Venous registries about. This one is free. Anybody who does venous practice can use it. There's a public-facing thing. If you actually are part of the Venous, it's not going to cost you anything, but you'll get all your results and you'll get benchmarked against everybody else in the world who uses it. You can use that to prove to insurers and regulatory bodies that you're part of audit. And you can put a logo on your website or your literature saying that you are part of an audit and you are going forward. Owen Haskins is outside. He's part of Venous Times and also part of this. This is just undergoing beta testing at the moment, and it will be widely available within a couple of months. We're also going to be launching tomorrow. There's been a one-year study that's been done by PB Consulting under the guidance of Boston Scientific along with the Whiteley Clinic, looking at pelvic congestion syndrome and how abysmally it's treated. In fact, it's ignored in the UK. And this is going to be presented to government as a proper research paper by a lobby group. And so this is actually being launched tomorrow at this conference. There's also a thing for leg ulcers that we've only just had confirmation yesterday, so I haven't said it too widely, called MeadowPad, and it's where patients and carers can download this for free, because once again, the Leg Ulcer Charity is paying for it, and they can map their own leg ulcers, how they're going forward, and they can actually then share any information with their carers. They can actually keep their own records, their own duplexes, their own dressings, and then they can actually select which people they want to share it with or which not. And finally, there is something going to be launched on Friday, provided the solicitors say I can name it, which is a new nutritional support for leg ulcers, because every research project has shown that people with chronic wounds are nutritionally deficient in certain areas. I'm not allowed to say any more about it at the moment till I've got the go-ahead from the IP lawyers, which unfortunately I was on the phone at 7 o'clock this morning trying to raise them, but lawyers don't get into 9:30, I'm told. So what's the future? We will continue with this whole idea. We're going to continue the education, the books, hopefully the annual meeting, the live cases, the science, and really disseminating research and registry data in the future. But also, because we've sort of got to that stage where there's a lot of meetings about, a lot of ideas about, we're very open. I've got my clear ideas what I want to be. I want a collegiate idea where everybody can talk and share things. I don't want a competitive thing where we exclude people. But if anybody's got any ideas how we can enhance it further, or even when you get to the end of this course, you think, well, it's been okay, but I would have preferred this, that, and the other, for goodness sake, please do tell us so we can make it better for everyone. Thank you all very much for your attention.